Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling back to the weird and wobbly beginnings of the universe. No, not the Big Bang kind, but the Greek myth kind, which is basically chaos, eggs, darkness, and a lot of divine side eyes. Picture floating nothingness, like actual void, silence, no land, no sky, not even an awkward date to escape from. Just chaos. And out of that nothing, stuff starts happening, because apparently even the void got bored eventually. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in from somewhere snowy, sunny, or somewhere in between, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes into pure darkness. Not a sleepy room, but full-on cosmic void. No stars, no gods, just you and a faint, humming pressure like the universe is holding its breath. And then, gently, things start happening. First comes chaos. Not like your sock drawer, but a sort of cosmic soup. The Greeks didn't really mean confusion here. They meant the yawning nothing that everything comes from. A gap, a deep breath before creation. And out of that yawning gap, things emerge. First, Gaia, the earth, who just sort of appears. No stork involved. She's solid, dependable, and already thinking about interior design. Then Tartarus, the gloomy underworld, shows up beneath her like a basement no one asked for. Eros arrives too, the embodiment of desire. Not the glittery, Valentine kind, but the drive that pushes things to become. That little whisper that says, hey, maybe there should be more. Oh, and let's not forget Nyx, the night, and Erebus, the shadow. Creeping in around the edges. They're the original moody couple. Together, they make ether, light, and hemera, day. You'd think things would get brighter after that, but no, it's just the beginning of generations of divine soap opera. Gaia, without any need for romance or even a dinner date, gives birth to Uranus, the sky. That's right, she creates the literal heavens. Then she and Uranus, aka her son, start having kids. Yep, welcome to Greek mythology, where the family tree is basically a wreath that folds in on itself. Don't try to map it. It will hurt your brain. Together, they create the Titans, the hundred-handed Hecatoncheires, and the Cyclops. Yes, giant baby monsters. Uranus, like a dad at a school play who's suddenly realized his kid has fangs, is horrified. So what does he do? Shoves them back inside Gaia. Yes, inside the Earth. Honestly, not a great move. Gaia is understandably not thrilled. Historians still argue whether this primal story was metaphor, oral poetry, or just an attempt to explain geology with drama. But either way, Gaia takes action. She makes a sickle and hands it to her youngest Titan son, Cronus. He ambushes Uranus during a very unfortunate moment and, how to say this delicately, removes the sky god's divine manhood. Yeet. Cronus hurls the severed bit into the sea, and from the frothy mess, Aphrodite is born. And yes, that's her origin story. The goddess of love rises not from gentle waves, but from the cosmic equivalent of a crime scene. The Greeks really didn't do subtle. Meanwhile, Cronus becomes the new head honcho. But here's the thing about prophecy in Greek myth. It's basically the universe's auto-reply that says, whatever you do, this will definitely come back to bite you. Cronus learns that one of his kids will overthrow him. So he starts swallowing them. Like vitamins. One by one. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all get gulped down like very unhappy pills. Fringe tales say he didn't even chew. Just straight down the divine hatch. But Rhea, his wife and sister, obviously, decides enough is enough. When she births her sixth child, Zeus, she swaps the baby with a rock and hides the real boy in a cave on Crete. The rock gets eaten, delicious, and Zeus is raised in secret by nymphs and, in some versions, a goat. A magical goat who sometimes nurses him, sometimes attacks monsters, and in at least one account, gives him a musical rattle. Because of course she does. And as Zeus grows up, plot twist, he does overthrow his dad. With help from Métis, a clever goddess he later swallows. Long story, he gets Cronus to barf up his siblings. The Olympians assemble. It's like the original Avengers, if the Avengers argued more and threw thunderbolts at each other during dinner. You're only one generation in, and already the family reunions require seating charts, weapon checks, and probably therapy. But this is the world you're stepping into now, a place of divine grudges, impossible births, and sky eggs turning into goddesses. It's loud, it's tangled, and no one ever just talks it out. Still, there's something comforting here too. You know how it starts. Chaos, void, then, step by step, shape and story. That's how myth works. That's how sleep sometimes works too. From murky thoughts, meaning starts to form. From noise, rhythm. From stillness, dreams. You're floating now, softly, on the surface of that ancient void. Not afraid, just drifting. The gods are waking up. The stars are finding their places. The sky stretches overhead, endless, humming, and maybe still holding a grudge. You're still floating gently through the mythic fog, but now the air feels heavier, thicker with tension, like the moment before someone flips a board game in a family feud. Welcome to the Titan era, the age of Cronus, king of the universe, champion of extreme parenting, and living proof that just because you dethrone your dad doesn't mean you won't become him. Now that Cronus has seized power by deskying Uranus and establishing Titan rule, you'd think things might settle. Maybe even get a little peaceful. Nope. The Titan generation is what you'd call cosmically unstable, giant egos, poor conflict resolution, and zero interest in compromise. Cronus sits on his sky throne, pretending everything is fine, even as he regularly eats his own children and ignores the fact that the last one is growing up somewhere on Crete with a goat and some unresolved ambition. But let's talk Titans. There were 12 original ones, 6 guys, 6 girls. Like a divine casting call. You've got Oceanus, eternal ocean, Hyperion, light, Iapetus, mortality, Themis, order, Mnemosyne, memory, and Rhea, motherhood, but with side eyes. These aren't cuddly clouds in togas. They are raw forces of nature, barely wrapped in human metaphor. They embody rivers, time, laws, ideas. But they also gossip, marry each other, and occasionally hurl boulders. Fringe mythologists say that the Titans were originally elemental giants. Think more mountain-sized than Marvel-sized. But their stories got domesticated over time. One scholar even suggested they symbolized natural disasters. Another claimed they were the memory of pre-Greek deities overridden by Olympian propaganda. Historians still argue whether the Titans were meant to be worshipped, feared, or just blamed for earthquakes and sibling rivalries. Cronus, being the poster child for hubris, thinks he's outsmarted fate by snacking on his heirs. But we already know about Zeus, raised in secret, nursed by divine goat milk, and possibly trained in wrestling by magical bees. As you do. Eventually, Zeus comes of age and decides it's time for a little payback. But he doesn't show up swinging thunderbolts right away. First, he plays it smart. He tricks Cronus into vomiting up his siblings using a potion or a medic, depending on which version you prefer, and just like that, the Olympians are back on the board. And then comes the Titanomachy. 10 years of cosmic war. Titans versus Olympians. Old gods versus new gods. Think sky quaking, earth shattering, the kind of family drama that makes your holiday dinners look downright civil. The Olympians are flashy and energetic. The Titans are grumpy and entrenched. And the war drags on. Eventually, Gaia gets annoyed with the noise and tells Zeus he needs better backup. So he does something radical. He frees the Hecatoncheires, those 100-handed guys Cronus locked up, along with the Cyclops. In return, the Cyclops gift him thunder and lightning. Classic, you break me out, I give you sky weapons, transaction. The Hecatoncheires, with their 50 heads and 100 arms each, start hurling boulders at Titans like they're on some apocalyptic dodgeball team. Very effective. Zeus, finally armed with the universe's most powerful glow stick, strikes the final blow. The Titans fall. And here's where it gets grim. Zeus banishes the defeated Titans to Tartarus, the deep pit beneath the underworld, darker than Hades, lonelier than a forgotten sock. He posts the hecatoncheires as eternal jail guards. Poetic justice or overkill? Historians still argue whether the punishment was symbolic or a narrative device to justify why you don't see titans walking around Athens. Not all titans get the boot, though. Some get lucky. Themis and Mnemosyne, for example, play nice and eventually become important Olympian side characters. Others, like Prometheus and Epimetheus, survive to cause more chaos later. More on them soon, but back to Zeus. Now the sky belongs to him. Poseidon gets the sea, Hades gets the underworld. It's a sibling land grab, and somehow everyone agrees that drawing lots is a fair system, which honestly feels like a stretch. The Titanomachy ends, but it leaves a heavy silence behind. Like the air after a thunderstorm. You can still feel the cracks. The world has changed. The Olympians are in charge now, but the old ways aren't forgotten. They're buried deep, beneath the earth, where shadows whisper and memories flicker like old film reels. And you're just floating through it all, watching these divine soap operas unfold, wondering how long this new piece will last. Because you've seen enough myth by now to know, nothing stays quiet for long. So now the dust has settled. The Titans are buried deep in Tartarus, nursing their bruised egos and probably debating whether it was all worth it. And here you are, hovering gently over Mount Olympus, home of the shiny new management team. The Olympians. If the Titans were raw forces of nature, the Olympians are more theatrical. Flashier. Think office politics meets reality TV. And the leader of the pack? Zeus, sky god, lightning hurler, and walking HR violation. Zeus has claimed the throne with all the thunderous drama you'd expect. He didn't just take over, he redesigned the office, installed lightning bolts as a feature, and gave everyone roles based on divine nepotism. He rules the sky, Poseidon takes the sea, a salty job, but someone has to do it, and Hades accepts the underworld with the weary resignation of someone who drew the short straw at a family reunion. But Olympus isn't a democracy. It's more of a celestial wa, where Zeus acts like chairman, judge, and frequent rule breaker. He lives in a massive palace floating above the clouds, with white marble floors, bottomless wine goblets, and the occasional eagle circling for dramatic effect. And just beneath all that power? Insecurity. Because Zeus may have won the Titan War, but that prophecy thing? Still hanging over his head like storm clouds. The same warning Cronus got now echoes toward Zeus. One of his children might overthrow him too. And he's not handling it well. But before we get to his weird coping mechanisms, let's meet the crew. First, there's Hera, his sister and also his wife, because mythological family trees are more like tangled vines. Hera is queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, and full-time vengeance consultant. She has trust issues, but to be fair, her husband's track record includes disguises as bulls, swans, and golden rain to seduce mortals. You'd be suspicious too. Then comes Poseidon, trident-wielding god of the sea, earthquakes, and mood swings. He's the salty middle brother, powerful, often cranky, and deeply fond of horses for reasons no one quite understands. His palace is underwater, decked out in coral and seafoam, but he frequently storms up to Olympus to argue about land rights. Hades is quieter. He doesn't spend much time on Olympus. He rules the underworld with calm, grim efficiency, like the guy at work who doesn't go to happy hour but always has perfect spreadsheets. Mortals fear him, but he rarely meddles. He's less evil villain, and more tired uncle with a skeletal filing cabinet. Now let's sprinkle in a few of the others. Demeter, goddess of grain, mother of seasons, and likely the one who would have invented carbs if the Greeks hadn't already. Don't mess with her daughter, seriously, just don't. Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home, is the low-key MVP. She keeps the fires burning and avoids all the divine bickering by staying in her lane. Some versions say she eventually gave up her seat on Olympus to Dionysus just for some peace and quiet. Iconic. And then the next generation rolls in, Athena, born from Zeus's forehead after he swallowed her pregnant mother, because Greek myths have zero chill about childbirth. She's the goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and giving men well-articulated reasons to sit down. Apollo and Artemis, twins with matching intensity. He's the sun god, she's the moon hunter. He plays the liar and flirts badly, she shoots arrows and avoids eye contact. Together, they bring symmetry and occasional passive aggression. Ares, god of war, is all brawn and very little strategy. He's the guy who charges in swinging before reading the instructions. His mom, Hera, loves him. Literally no one else does. Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, is the hard-working, underappreciated blacksmith who builds weapons, palaces, and all the divine furniture. Zeus threw him off Olympus once. He limps now but keeps building stuff, like, say, robotic golden maidens. Fringe myths suggest he invented AI before it was cool. Aphrodite, born from sea foam and unresolved drama, makes hearts flutter and cause absolute chaos. She's married to Hephaestus but prefers Ares, because of course she does. Historians still argue whether she was originally a borrowed goddess from older Eastern cultures or homegrown chaos incarnate. Oh, and Hermes, god of travel, commerce, and fast-talking his way out of trouble. He wears winged sandals, delivers divine messages, and probably has 10 side hustles going at any given moment. You know the type. By now, Olympus is fully staffed. Drama flows like nectar. Power struggles flare up every Tuesday. And through it all, Zeus tries to keep control, mostly by turning into various animals and pretending his questionable behavior is destiny. There's no single myth that explains how Olympus operated day to day, but fringe theorists love to imagine it like a celestial bureaucracy. One suggested Zeus kept thunderbolt forms in triplicate. Another claimed there was a divine rotation schedule for mortals needing favors. Historians still argue whether Olympus was meant to mirror human politics, satirize it, or just give mortals someone to blame for bad weather. You picture it now, the wind brushing your face as you walk those shining halls, the clouds parting under your feet, the bickering echoing off marble pillars. No meetings end on time. No one brings snacks, but the gossip? Divine. And as you drift past the gold-lined thrones and peacock feathers, you realize something. These gods may be powerful, but they're also petty, vain, impulsive, and frequently ridiculous. In short, they're just like people, only louder. You drift through the polished halls of Olympus, where thunderclouds hang like curtains and the marble is probably imported from somewhere mythical. The gossip here could boil ambrosia. And the stars of the show tonight? The goddesses, regal, radiant, and fully booked with grudges. Because you've seen how Zeus rules, with lightning bolts and very loose interpretations of monogamy. But it's the women of Olympus who really keep things interesting. Sometimes they're wise, sometimes vengeful, sometimes just flat out done. Let's start with Hera, because no one holds a grudge like the queen of the gods. Hera, goddess of marriage and women, is married to Zeus, but not happy about it. Not since, well, basically ever. You remember how Zeus has a thing for disguises? Well, Hera remembers all of them. Swan, bull, golden mist, you name it. If Zeus could shapeshift into a scented candle to seduce someone, he probably did. And Hera? She's not mad at him, oh no. She's mad at everyone else. That's why so many myths feature Hera tormenting some poor mortal woman or her innocent child. Like poor Semele, mother of Dionysus, who got tricked into asking Zeus to show his true godly form and basically exploded on the spot. Hera arranged that, or Io, a mortal priestess turned into a cow just to keep her away from Zeus. Cow, like, full grazing rights and mooing. Not subtle. Fringe scholars have tried to defend Hera, saying she's a misunderstood figure of divine order, not jealousy. Historians still argue whether her vengeance was cultural symbolism or just ancient fanfiction gone rogue. Then there's Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, weaving, and making men feel inferior in arguments. Unlike many Olympians, she's not messy. She's sharp, composed, fully armored and probably judging you right now. Remember, she popped out of Zeus's skull fully grown and in full battle gear. That's either incredibly efficient or deeply concerning. Athena doesn't date, doesn't flirt, and absolutely doesn't tolerate nonsense. When Arachne, a mortal woman, claimed she was a better weaver than the goddess herself, Athena challenged her to a loom off. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, too flawless. So Athena, unable to let it go, turned her into the first spider. Harsh, but poetic. You float past Athena now in her bronze-plated stillness, and she doesn't blink. Doesn't need to. She's already 5 moves ahead of you. And then, Aphrodite. She doesn't walk. She glides. Goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and really bad decisions. Born from sea foam, draped in charm, and often stirring the pot just because it's fun. She's married to Hephaestus but having a loud affair with Ares. Everyone knows. No one's shocked. Aphrodite isn't just about romance. She weapon it. When Paris, a Trojan prince, is asked to judge a divine beauty contest, it's Aphrodite who promises him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. And just like that, boom, Trojan War. But we'll get to that flaming disaster later. She's also mother to Eros, Cupid, who wanders around shooting people with love darts like some winged emotional terrorist. One myth even says Aphrodite fell for Anchises, a mortal, disguised herself as a Phrygian princess, and bore him a son. Divine love rarely ends quietly. You'd think that's enough drama for one pantheon, but we haven't even touched Artemis yet. Twin sister to Apollo, she's goddess of the hunt, wild animals, chastity, and zero patience. You try to talk to Artemis about romance and she will turn you into a deer and have you chased by your own hounds. Just ask Actaeon. She roams forests, arrow-ready, flanked by nymphs who probably have a "no men allowed" group chat. She's not interested in flattery, or mortals, or being interrupted. Artemis is the god you want on your side in a crisis, but not at your dinner party. There's something fascinating about these goddesses. They're not background players. They're not accessories. They're powerhouses. Love, war, vengeance, creation, they hold it all. But they don't always agree. And when they don't, you get divine cataclysm. Take that time they all fought over a golden apple. To the fairest, it read. Big mistake. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it. Zeus, being no fool, passed the decision to a mortal, Paris. Spoiler alert, he chose Aphrodite. The other two never forgot. That apple? It rolled straight into war. Fringe interpretations of that story suggest it was symbolic, 3 aspects of womanhood, or a metaphor for political unrest in pre-Homeric times. Others say it's just proof that the gods were deeply bored and loved drama. Historians still argue whether these goddesses were divine archetypes or just very stylish cautionary tales. But here's the thing, in this grand Olympian palace, with its thunder and torches and wine that refills itself, it's the women who set the tempo. The gods fight, the goddesses maneuver, they charm, curse, bless, punish, weave, and unravel. And you drift past them in this strange eternal twilight, watching the sparks between Athena's wisdom and Aphrodite's desire, Hera's fury and Artemis's fierce solitude. It's like living inside a mythological chess game, where every move ripples through centuries. You're not just floating now, you're learning the patterns, seeing how myth unfolds not with logic, but with personality, with pride, with gods and goddesses who feel as flawed and fierce as the people who dreamed them up. And if you thought this was complicated already, well, just wait until the babies start arriving. You're drifting now through the cracks in Olympus, the quieter corners where divine babies cry, grow up too fast, and usually get flung off a cliff or turned into grapes. Because if there's one thing Greek mythology does consistently, it's give children the most unhinged origin stories possible. Welcome to the parenting section, where the gods raise kids by accident, prophecy, or petty revenge. Let's start with Hephaestus. He's not just the god of fire and forging cool weapons, he's also the poster child for mythological bad parenting. Depending on the version, either Hera alone, or both Hera and Zeus, birth him. But when baby Hephaestus is born, less than perfect, some say with a limp, others just not glowing with divine charisma, Hera hurls him off Olympus. Just yeets him. He falls for an entire day and lands in the ocean. Ouch. He's rescued by sea nymphs, who raise him in a cave. And while other divine kids are learning how to throw lightning bolts or turn into swans, Hephaestus quietly teaches himself how to craft anything. Armor, jewelry, robots with golden joints. Literal automatons. Yes, ancient Greek robot maids. Eventually, the gods notice his talents and invite him back, but the childhood trauma? Very much still simmering beneath the forge. Then there's Dionysus. You know him as the god of wine, parties, and general chaos, but his birth story is complicated. Zeus has an affair with Semele, a mortal princess. Hera, playing her usual long game, disguises herself as a kindly old woman and convinces Semele to ask Zeus to show himself in his full godly form. Never a good idea. Zeus complies. Semele is instantly incinerated, but the baby? Zeus rescues the fetus and sews it into his own thigh until it's ready to be born. You're not hallucinating. Dionysus is technically thigh-born. Fringe scholars love to interpret this as symbolic of masculine womb envy or divine rebirth cycles, but let's be honest, it's mostly just weird. Dionysus grows up wandering, half mortal, half divine, full of confusion and, eventually, really good wine. He invents theater, madness, and maybe hangovers. And unlike most of the gods, he actually spends time with mortals, blessing some, punishing others, often both in the same day. His followers? A mix of nymphs, wild women called Maenads, and the occasional tipsy goatman. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always part of the Greek pantheon or was imported from Thrace or Asia Minor. His rituals are older than many Olympians, which is why some myths treat him like an outsider. Even in godhood, he's the new kid, crashing the party and redecorating the temple. Now let's talk Hermes. He's the kind of kid who could run a black market in preschool. Born to Maia, a nymph, he escapes his swaddling on day 1, steals Apollo's cattle, invents the lyre from a tortoise shell, and charms his way out of punishment. All before lunch. Instead of being grounded for eternity, Hermes impresses everyone so much he gets promoted to messenger of the gods. He's also in charge of shepherds, commerce, thieves, and guiding souls to the underworld. Basically, the busiest intern in the divine universe. You glide through his myth like a wind gust with sandals on. He's clever, slippery, and always moving. The god of transitions, of in-between. Liminal spaces. Open doorways. That little moment where something begins or ends. He's not chaotic like Dionysus, but he is unpredictable. Now, for the ultimate parenting mess, Athena. Zeus hears a prophecy, again, because those always end well, that any child born of his lover Métis will overthrow him. So instead of, having a conversation, he swallows her whole. Because that's a totally normal response. But Métis was already pregnant. So Zeus ends up with a pounding headache, until Hephaestus kindly splits his skull open with an axe. And out pops Athena, fully grown, armored, and probably already judging both of them. Born from thought, from fear, from trying to avoid fate and, ironically, fulfilling it in a whole new way. Athena never had a mother in the traditional sense. And unlike many gods, she never marries, never has children. She's a concept more than a person, wisdom wrapped in bronze, untouchable. Some say she represents the birth of strategy over brute strength. Others say she was co-opted from earlier war goddesses and repackaged for Athens. Historians still argue whether she's a symbol of empowerment or patriarchal control in a polished helmet. But all these stories, from thigh-born wine gods to skull-splitting birth scenes, have something in common. They're not really about kids. They're about legacy, about fear, about how power gets passed down, or doesn't. The gods don't raise children like humans do. They create them like fireworks, secrets, or accidents. And the consequences ripple. You don't just get a baby, you get war, prophecy, entire cults. And you're floating through these stories like a babysitter who walked into the wrong shift. Everything's loud, glowing, and covered in mysterious symbols. But there's beauty too, a kind of surreal poetry in how these chaotic births shape whole mythologies. So maybe tonight, as you curl deeper into the warmth of your blanket, you think about the messy way things begin. Not with control, but with bursts, with fears, with strange hope. Because from the thigh of Zeus, from a shattered skull, from abandonment and fire, something always emerges. You drift now through a golden afternoon, somewhere between divine sunlight and warm dream haze. Strings of lyre music echo softly, and a sweet, citrusy scent follows you. Like sun-warmed orange groves and ancient poetry. You know who's coming. Apollo, shining, sculpted, and so sure of himself. He's the golden boy of Olympus. Literally, god of the sun, music, prophecy, healing, and probably overly dramatic breakups. Apollo is the kind of figure who walks into a room and expects it to brighten. And often, it does. But for all his brilliance, Apollo has a fatal flaw. He's really, really bad at romance. You meet him first as a baby, son of Zeus and Leto. Hera, of course, tries to sabotage Leto's labor by forbidding any land to offer her shelter. Typical Hera. Eventually, a floating island called Delos agrees to host the delivery. Apollo is born in sunlight, immediately begins glowing, and within days, is fully grown. Because of course, his twin sister, Artemis, arrives shortly after and, fun fact, helps deliver him. Imagine being born and immediately assisting in a divine birth. Some fringe myths claim she was born first and older, others say they were split seconds apart. Historians still argue whether their myth reflects lunar-solar duality or just a poetic sense of symmetry. Anyway, Apollo grows up to be dazzling, blonde curls, lyre slung over his shoulder, a poetic glow in his eyes, and he immediately sets about doing dramatic things. First, he slays the giant Python at Delphi, a monstrous guardian of the old Earth goddess. He establishes his own sacred oracle there and becomes the god of prophecy. Because nothing says new management like kicking out the snake and installing your own priestess. But for all his sunny talents, Apollo is a walking romantic disaster. Let's start with Daphne, a river nymph, fast on her feet and absolutely not interested. Apollo, inflated with hubris after a win against the serpent, mocks Eros, yes, the love god. Bad move. Eros shoots Apollo with a love arrow and Daphne with a repelling one. The result? Apollo falls head over heels, and Daphne runs like her sandals are on fire. She begs her father, a river god, to save her. He obliges by turning her into a laurel tree. Roots, branches, the whole arboreal package. Apollo, devastated, declares the laurel sacred and wears its leaves as a crown from then on. Because nothing says, I respect your boundaries, like fashioning your crush into headwear. Next comes Cassandra, a Trojan princess, clever and lovely. Apollo offers her the gift of prophecy in exchange for affection. She agrees, then backs out. Apollo, in a fit of divine pettiness, curses her. She'll still see the future, but no one will believe her. Imagine knowing the city will burn, screaming about wooden horses, and everyone going, yeah, sure, Cassandra. She goes mad, or maybe she doesn't. Historians still argue whether Cassandra is a symbol of silenced women, divine injustice, or just a poetic device for foreshadowing doom. And then there's Hyacinthus, a mortal youth, adored by Apollo. They play discus one day, because that's how gods flirt, and tragedy strikes. The discus bounces off a rock and hits Hyacinthus in the head. He dies in Apollo's arms. Grieving, Apollo transforms his spilled blood into a flower, the hyacinth. A beautiful, sad gesture. Though in some versions, it's Zephyrus, the jealous west wind, who deliberately blows the discus off course. Even in love, Apollo can't catch a break. But he keeps trying, keeps playing his golden lyre, healing plagues, illuminating truths. He's not cruel, just proud. And that pride is his undoing again and again. Like the time he and Pan, the goat-legged music god, have a musical contest. Pan plays the pan flute. Apollo, of course, dazzles with the lyre. The mountain god Tiamalus declares Apollo the winner. Everyone agrees, except Midas. Yes, that Midas. He votes for Pan. Apollo, never one to take criticism well, gives Midas donkey ears. A subtle reminder to stay in your lane. You glide past Apollo now, reclining on a sun-drenched hill, tuning his lyre, eyes closed. The music is flawless, but there's a tension in his jaw. Like he knows the next love will go wrong. Like he already hears the future and can't stop it. And maybe that's the tragedy of Apollo. All that power, all that insight, and still helpless in matters of the heart. He can see everything, except when someone doesn't love him back. There's a fringe theory that Apollo represents the rational mind trying to control the wildness of emotion. That his failed romances are metaphors for how reason always loses to instinct. Historians still argue whether he was worshipped more for his light or his lessons, whether he's meant to be admired or pitied. But here in this drifting, glowing moment, you just feel the music. It wraps around you like sun-warmed silk. You hear every hope, every heartbreak, every divine frustration plucked across golden strings. Apollo is a god, yes. But his myth is deeply human. Beautiful, frustrated, always almost in love. And as you float further through these warm, shimmering echoes, one thing becomes very clear: even immortals get ghosted. The music fades behind you, leaving the air a little heavier, a little darker. The clouds gather low, curling like breath from a sleeping giant. You're heading now into shadowed woods and colder wind, where the myths don't shine, they flicker. Because this is where you meet Artemis. Twin to Apollo, yes, but she's his mirror, not his echo. Where he burns like sun-drenched marble, she moves like moonlight through trees. Quiet, cold, and swift. Goddess of the hunt, the wild, chastity, childbirth, and things that live between silence and movement. Artemis doesn't smile often. She doesn't need to. She's born first, on Delos, and almost immediately helps her mother deliver Apollo. From that moment on, she becomes a protector of women, but not the nurturing kind with lullabies and soup. No, Artemis is more fierce ant with a bow energy. You glide beside her now, barefoot in silver, bow slung casually over her shoulder, a pack of nymphs following silently, their steps synchronized with forest rustling. No men allowed, ever. Artemis doesn't flirt, doesn't entertain. She guards her independence like a fortress. But in myths, privacy is always broken. Let's talk about Actaeon, a hunter. Young, curious, probably the kind of guy who calls himself an outdoorsman on his dating profile. One day, he stumbles upon Artemis bathing in a forest spring. Not spying, just unlucky timing. Artemis sees him, doesn't scream, doesn't panic, just changes him into a stag. A beautiful one. And then, his own hunting dogs rip him apart. Yep. Some scholars interpret this story as a warning against violating sacred boundaries. Others think it's just what happens when mortals accidentally crash a divine girl's spa day. Historians still argue whether Actaeon deserved his fate, or if Artemis overreacted just a tiny bit. She doesn't stop there. Take Callisto, one of her nymph followers, who swore an oath of chastity. Zeus, surprise, surprise, disguises himself as Artemis and tricks Callisto. She becomes pregnant. Artemis finds out. Callisto is expelled. In some versions, she's turned into a bear and later placed among the stars as Ursa Major. Even in space, there's no peace. And then there's Orion. Ah, Orion. A hunter, bold and handsome. He travels with Artemis, hunts beside her, and there's tension. Some say love, others say sibling energy. But the myths disagree. One version claims Apollo, overprotective big brother that he is, tricks Artemis into shooting Orion by pointing him out as a distant target across the sea. She fires, perfect as always. When his body washes up, she realizes what she's done. Her grief is quiet but permanent. She lifts him to the sky as a constellation. He still walks there, eternal, never quite close enough. Fringe theorists suggest Orion's story reflects the taboo against Artemis loving anyone. Some say she's an echo of older, more primal hunting goddesses who were never meant to bend. Others argue her harshness is overemphasized, a later invention to soften male deities by contrast. But you watch her string her bow in silence. You see the moon rise behind her eyes. Artemis doesn't need to be understood. She needs space. And she'll make it, if necessary. She is the forest's breath. The rustle in the branches when no one's there. The thing that moves just outside the corner of your eye. You can't chase her. She chooses if you're allowed near. Her realm is not about conquest. It's about protection. Of boundaries. Of silence. Of the wildness that doesn't want to be tamed. And yet, she's also called upon in childbirth. Strange, right? A virgin goddess helping with birth? But that's Artemis. full of contradictions. She governs transitions, the threshold moments when one state becomes another. Girl to woman, life to death, moonrise to dawn. You walk beside her now through a grove of silver trees. Every leaf catches starlight, every breeze carries the howl of a far-off wolf. And she says nothing, just nods once, approval, maybe? Or warning. There's a kind of peace here, yes, but it's not soft. It's earned. It's sharpened on the edges of oak branches and animal tracks. It's the kind of peace that demands stillness. And as you let the forest wrap around you, Artemis slips back into the shadows. A single footprint left behind in the moss. Gone, but not gone. You don't call after her. You wouldn't dare. You leave the hush of Artemis's woods, stepping quietly out from shadow into stone. The temperature shifts, not colder, but heavier, like descending into the deep part of thought. This isn't Olympus anymore, this is the underworld, and waiting at its gates, solemn and still, is Hades. God of the dead, Lord of shadows, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, but worlds apart. While the others claimed the sky and sea, Hades drew the short straw, literally, and accepted the land of the dead. No thunderbolts, no oceans, just bones, memories, and a job nobody else wanted. You might expect fire and screaming souls. But no, the underworld isn't chaos. It's order. Silent rivers, gray skies, and endless repetition. A kingdom of endings, not punishments. Hades rules it all with calm, distant dignity. He doesn't seek worship. He doesn't throw parties. He manages eternity like a bureaucrat with perfect penmanship. There's no throne here, just a darkened court, quiet as ash. Hades sits beside Persephone, whose story you already half know. She's the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. One day, Persephone is picking flowers. The ground opens up. Hades emerges in a chariot pulled by black horses and takes her to the underworld. Depending on the version, he loves her. Or he's just following the rules. Or the rules were made to suit him. Demeter, heartbroken, searches the earth. Crops wither. Seasons pause. The world forgets how to grow. Eventually, a deal is struck. Persephone can return to her mother, but only if she hasn't eaten anything in the underworld. She has. Just a few pomegranate seeds. Maybe 6. Maybe 3. Scholars can't agree, but it's enough. So she must return each year for part of the cycle. When she's with Hades, the earth sleeps. When she returns, spring follows. Historians still argue whether this myth began as an agricultural metaphor, a fertility ritual, or a way to explain seasonal affective disorder before anyone invented vitamin D supplements. But let's be clear, Persephone is not a victim forever. Over time, she becomes queen of the underworld. Not just a kidnapped bride, but a judge, a shadow, a figure mortals fear and revere. She and Hades rule together, not warmly, but with gravity. As equals. Maybe even with affection. Fringe myths describe them as one of the few faithful divine couples. Quiet, powerful, and uninterested in drama. You wander now through the asphodel fields, where ordinary souls drift like fog, uncelebrated, unlamented. There are other regions too, Elysium, the resting place of heroes. Tartarus, where the truly cursed suffer. And the river Styx, cold and black, circling the realm 9 times. Its waters bind oaths. Even gods don't break promises made on the Styx. A ferryman named Charon guides the dead across its currents. He accepts only bowls, the coins placed on eyes or tongues of the deceased. No coin, no passage. You wander past him now, his boat silent on still waters. There's Cerberus too, a 3-headed hound with matted fur and breath like scorched earth. He guards the entrance, not to keep people out, but to keep souls in. You step past him, and he watches without barking. Maybe he's sleepy. Maybe you're dreaming too well to be noticed. The underworld has its own rhythm. Judges wait in tall shadowed halls, Rhadamanthus, Minos, and Aeacus, ruling on each soul's fate. Not everyone gets eternal torment. Most just drift. A quiet afterlife. No flames, no halos. Just memory and murmur. Hades doesn't interfere much. He keeps records. He enforces rules. You won't find him chasing nymphs or throwing thunderbolts at mortals who forgot a sacrifice. But insult death? Cheat it? That's another story. Ask Sisyphus, who tricked Thanatos, the god of death, into chains so no one could die. Clever, yes. Until he was sentenced to roll a boulder uphill forever. Every time it nears the top, it rolls back down. An eternal reminder. Don't prank the reaper. Or Tantalus, who served his own son at a banquet for the gods. For that charming dinner party trick, he was doomed to stand in water he could never drink, under fruit he could never eat. A literal thirst trap. Hades doesn't invent these punishments. But he enforces them, without rage, without pleasure, just justice. Some fringe interpretations paint Hades as misunderstood, a god forced into darkness, doing the work no one else would. Others claim he's a late addition to the Greek pantheon, an adaptation of older chthonic deities. Historians still argue whether Hades was feared for his role, or simply because he reminded people that death is unavoidable. But there's no evil here. No cackling devil, just stillness. You wander among memories, through halls where names echo like wind, and realize this realm isn't cruel. It's necessary, and in its way, beautiful. You pass Persephone again, standing still beneath a tree of white blossoms. She nods, just once. It feels like permission, or a warning, or maybe both, and then you rise, up, out of shadow, into fading twilight. But some part of you stays. That's the thing about Hades. He doesn't take you, you leave something behind. The shadows of the underworld peel away, and light seeps back in, soft at first, then warmer, golden. Not the searing sun of Apollo or the silver hush of Artemis, but something more fragrant. Sensual, decorative. You're drifting into the domain of Aphrodite now, and you can already smell the rose petals. She's more than just a pretty face. Much more. Goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, persuasion, and chaos dressed as romance. And unlike the thunderous births of other Olympians, Aphrodite simply emerged, out of sea foam. No screaming, no skull-splitting headaches. Just waves, wind, and a sparkle of something unreasonable. One myth says she was born when Cronus tossed Uranus's severed parts into the ocean, and from that very awkward splash, she rose. Nude, of course, because clothing ruins the vibe. Another version says she's the daughter of Zeus and Dione, which is less scandalous and therefore much less interesting. Historians still argue whether she was a borrowed goddess from Eastern cults or a homegrown Greek icon given extra flair. But wherever she came from, the results are the same. No one looks at her and walks away unchanged. You float beside her now, watching her adjust her gold armband in a mirror that might also reflect your own desires. She smiles without smiling, her eyes like warm syrup in trouble. She doesn't try to be alluring. She just is. The kind of beauty that's magnetic, dangerous, and completely uninterested in your opinions. Naturally, the gods couldn't agree who got to marry her. So Zeus, in his infinite wisdom and complete misunderstanding of matchmaking, married her off to Hephaestus. The forge god, the one with soot on his hands and smoke in his beard. Kind, brilliant, dependable, sure. But not her style. Aphrodite, unsurprisingly, was not faithful. Her heart, if she has one, belongs to Ares. God of war, muscles, and not a lot of brain cells. It's an odd pairing, love and war, kisses and chaos. But maybe that's the point. Their affair is fiery and flagrant. They meet in secret, until one day Hephaestus catches them, literally. He crafts an invisible net, traps them mid-tryst, and invites all the gods to come laugh. Awkward? Very. Effective? Not really. Aphrodite doesn't seem remotely embarrassed. Even after the snare incident, she keeps stirring hearts and unraveling lives. Take Anchises, a mortal shepherd. Aphrodite disguises herself as a Phrygian princess, seduces him, then reveals herself in full divine glory afterward. Anchises, understandably terrified, begs not to be struck down. She lets him live, but their son? That would be Aeneas, yes, the future hero of the Aeneid. Aphrodite's maternal instincts are selective. Or take the tale of Pygmalion, a sculptor who creates a statue so perfect, he falls in love with it. Aphrodite, amused, brings the statue to life. Because who doesn't enjoy a little reality-bending romance? She's not always sweet, though. Ask Hippolytus, a devotee of Artemis who openly disrespects Aphrodite's domain. Bad idea. She arranges for his stepmother to fall in love with him. Tragedy ensues. Because if there's one rule here, it's this: do not ignore the goddess of love. She'll notice. And she doesn't do forgiveness. There's another story, one you might not have heard, about Harmonia, the daughter of Aphrodite and Ares. At her wedding, she receives a cursed necklace that brings misfortune for generations. Historians still argue whether this myth warns against divine unions or just reflects that love, no matter how divine, always comes with strings, and often curses, attached. Even the famous Judgment of Paris is a tale soaked in Aphrodite's influence. Remember the golden apple, marked, to the fairest? Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claim it. Paris, unlucky prince of Troy, must choose. Hera offers power. Athena offers wisdom. Aphrodite offers Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Guess who wins? Paris chooses Helen. The problem? She's already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Aphrodite helps Paris steal her away anyway, sparking the Trojan War. A single apple, a single promise, a single kiss, whole cities burned. Fringe theorists claim Aphrodite didn't just cause the war. She represented the volatile force of attraction in political form. That beauty itself could be a weapon, soft to the touch but ruinous in motion. But here's the part no one says out loud: Aphrodite doesn't care about happy endings. She's not your fairy godmother. She is divine gravity. You can't resist her because resistance isn't part of the game. She makes lovers forget their vows, kings abandon thrones, warriors weep, artists obsess, and mortals dream impossible dreams. She doesn't do this out of cruelty. She is the feeling, the ache, the hunger, the long stare across a crowded temple. And the aftermath? Well, that's your problem. As you float past her chamber, you catch one last glimpse. Aphrodite reclining in rose-scented twilight, a half-smile playing on her lips. She's watching someone, maybe you, maybe everyone. You suddenly understand why people built temples just to hope she'd glance their way. And then she turns, and the world keeps spinning. The perfume fades, the soft cooing of doves recedes. And with it, the teasing warmth of Aphrodite's realm gives way to the clank of armor, the scent of iron and sweat, and the unmistakable atmosphere of trouble brewing. You don't even have to look to know who's coming next. It's Ares, god of war. Not strategy, not clever battle plans, not heroic triumphs. Just war. Red, raw, irrational, and loud. If Athena is the clean edge of a sharpened blade, Ares is the dull thud of a spiked club. He doesn't calculate, he charges. You drift now across a scorched field, the sky the color of bruised metal. Dust hangs in the air like ash. You hear the stomp of hooves, the clash of spears, and somewhere in the distance, someone shouting a war cry without quite knowing why. That's Ares' influence, less motivation, more momentum. He doesn't inspire you to fight for justice. He just makes you want to fight. And yet, for all his chaos, Ares is strangely disliked. Even by the other gods. Even by Zeus, his own father. In the Iliad, Zeus flat out says he despises him. And that's saying something from a guy who likes to throw thunderbolts at people for minor slights. Part of the issue is Ares' style. He doesn't win wars, he just shows up to make them worse. He's often accompanied by his sons, Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, and by his sister Eris, goddess of discord. It's a real family picnic, and not the good kind. In myth, Ares is constantly being humiliated. There's the time he gets caught in that infamous golden net with Aphrodite. The other gods come by to laugh. He doesn't even fight back. Just waits until Hephaestus lets him go, probably muttering, "Never again," and definitely meaning, "Until next week." Or the time he challenges Athena during the Trojan War. Big mistake. She grabs a boulder and flattens him. Ares flees the battlefield screaming, like a girl, according to Homer, who had clearly picked a side. Historians still argue whether Ares represents an older, rawer god absorbed awkwardly into the refined Olympian system, or whether he was always meant to be a cautionary figure, power without wisdom. Some fringe scholars even argue that his myths are meant to pacify warrior cultures, by showing that untempered violence always loses to strategy. But he does have his moments. Take the Amazons, those fierce warrior women often connected to Ares by blood or influence. They fought like fury, lived apart from men, and were said to be his daughters or at least devotees. Ares may not win many wars, but he inspires some of the most memorable warriors. And in some regions, like Thrace, Ares was deeply respected. They saw not just the rage, but the passion, the ability to throw everything on the line, to sacrifice comfort for fire. You get the sense he wasn't made to be liked. He was made to burn. You pass him now, standing in the center of a blood-spattered arena, sword resting on one shoulder, not looking at anyone in particular. His armor is dented but not broken. His eyes are dark, unreadable. Not cruel, just simple. He fights. That's it. And beside him, in contrast, his occasional companion, Enyo. A lesser-known goddess of war and destruction. Where Ares shouts, Enyo smiles. Where he rushes, she dances. She's the embodiment of chaos made elegant. Some say she's his sister. Others, his lover. Some myths blur the line entirely, which, classic. Fringe mythologies place Enyo at the sacking of Troy, enjoying the ruin. Others say she rode beside Ares on a chariot pulled by fire-breathing horses. Historians still argue whether she was a separate entity or simply a shadow of Ares himself. War's seduction paired with war's brute force. But Ares doesn't rule a kingdom. He doesn't weave fate or cast prophecies. He doesn't bless crops or raise cities. He destroys. He interrupts. When he enters a myth, things break. Plans collapse. Lovers die. Heroes fall. Yet there's something honest about him. In a pantheon of tricksters and manipulators, Ares doesn't lie. You always know why he's there. And maybe, just maybe, he's necessary. Not admired, but needed. Because even in Olympus, not every problem can be solved with wisdom or wit. Sometimes, a god has to stomp onto the battlefield and swing until something gives. You drift away now from the bloody dust and echoing war cries. Ares doesn't wave. He barely notices you, but part of you understands him now, even if you don't like him. He's not the war itself. He's the scream that comes before the silence. The clang of bronze fades into echoes, and you find yourself climbing again, up from dust and steel toward a summit wreathed in mist. The air shifts from iron to incense, from rage to ritual. You're rising into the realm of Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, and the world's longest silent stare. She waits for no one and explains even less. You remember her entrance, cracking out of Zeus's skull, fully grown, armored, and already judging you. But that dramatic birth set the tone. Athena doesn't arrive softly. She arrives correct. She is wisdom personified, but not the cozy, bookish kind with glasses and hot tea. Athena is tactical, sharp, unsentimental. If knowledge were a weapon, she'd have forged it, named it something meaningful in ancient Greek, and taught you exactly how to use it to win without blinking. You pass under marble colonnades now, tall and silent. Olive trees sway in the breeze. The scent of oil and parchment fills the air. And there she is, bronze helm tilted back, owl perched on one arm, eyes scanning some invisible battlefield. Not for threats, for flaws in your strategy. She is the patron of Athens, yes, named after her. When the city was new, both Athena and Poseidon vied to become its protector. Poseidon offered saltwater, which, honestly, feels like a bit of a throwaway gift. Athena planted the olive tree, a symbol of peace, nourishment, and economic stability. The Athenians voted for her. It was close. Some versions say women voted for Athena, men for Poseidon, and women outnumbered the men by a single vote. Poseidon, being Poseidon, flooded part of the city in a divine tantrum. But Athena's tree remained, and still stands on the Acropolis today. She doesn't just guide cities. She shapes heroes. Athena is the GPS of every half-competent protagonist in Greek myth. Odysseus would have died somewhere near a giant's foot if not for her advice. Perseus? She handed him the mirror shield to defeat Medusa. Even Heracles, brawniest of the brawny, needed her strategic brain to survive his labors. And she doesn't just show up to help. She coaches. She plans. She plays the long game. But don't confuse her for gentle. Athena does not suffer fools, and she never forgives hubris. Take Arachne, a mortal weaver so talented, she claimed to rival the gods. Athena, disguised as an old woman, her go-to infiltration look, warned her to dial it back. Arachne didn't, so they had a weaving contest. Arachne's tapestry? Technically perfect, but it mocked the gods. Athena, infuriated, not just at the insult, but at the accuracy, destroyed it and transformed her into a spider. Moral: stay humble, and maybe stop weaving divine gossip into your art. Fringe scholars suggest Arachne's tale is older than Athena's cult, perhaps an echo of older spider goddesses absorbed into her mythology. Historians still argue whether Athena is a champion of women's intellect or a cautionary tale about outshining male-approved standards of appropriate genius. There's also Medusa, a story that gets murkier the deeper you go. In later versions, Medusa was a beautiful priestess of Athena, attacked in the temple by Poseidon. For this violation, Athena didn't punish Poseidon, she transformed Medusa into a gorgon. Some see this as cruel. Others say it was protection, turning her into something unassailable. Scholars still argue whether Athena's choice reflects divine patriarchy or divine subversion. What's certain, Athena's gaze is sharp. She sees, not just surface, but cause and consequence. She's the reason the owl became a symbol of wisdom, because it watches at night, in silence, noticing everything. You watch her now, across a wide stone courtyard. She's practicing with a spear, not angrily, not urgently, just with precision, muscle memory, like she's always ready, a storm that thinks before it strikes. She invented many things: the bridle for taming horses, the chariot, the plow, even flute music, though she abandoned that one, said, puffing out her cheeks looked undignified. Fringe myths say she created the ship. Others credit her with the loom. She's the architect of order, the goddess of making sense out of mess. But she's also aloof, distant, often called a virgin goddess, not just in body, but in spirit. She loves ideas, not people. No divine romances. No whirlwind tragedies. She connects through guidance, not intimacy. And while many gods destroy, Athena builds. You float now past the Parthenon, that great temple erected in her honor, glowing white above a city she helped mold. Inside, once stood a statue of her, massive, golden, eyes like calm fire. She doesn't demand sacrifice. She demands excellence. And if you fail, well, you better have a really good excuse. Athena is not comforting. She is not soft. She's the mentor who never tells you, good job, but hands you another book, another plan, another lesson. And yet, you don't want to disappoint her. Because if you ever earn her nod, just once, it might be worth more than all the ambrosia in Olympus. You leave Athena's temple behind, stepping down from marble clarity into something messier, stickier, livelier. The rhythm changes. The air smells like ripe figs, sweat, crushed grapes, and mischief. Somewhere nearby, a tambourine jingles. Someone laughs too loudly, and then stumbles. You know where you are. Dionysus is near, god of wine, madness, theater, transformation, and really questionable party decisions. Dionysus doesn't enter quietly. He erupts. Wild hair, ivy crown, leopard print cloak, and the sort of grin that says, let's make mistakes on purpose. You don't meet Dionysus. You encounter him. He's one of the later Olympians, but he's also one of the oldest in spirit, born of chaos and frenzy. There are two main origin stories. One says he's the son of Zeus and Semele, a mortal princess. Hera, of course, meddles. She tricks Semele into asking Zeus to reveal himself in full god form. Zeus does, and Semele combusts. Dionysus is saved by being sewn into Zeus's thigh until he's ready to be born. Unorthodox? Absolutely. Effective? Apparently. Another myth says he was born of Persephone, and torn apart by Titans before being resurrected. Different versions, same energy. Dionysus is born twice. Fringe scholars suggest this reflects ancient initiation rites, death and rebirth, the transformation of identity. Historians still argue whether Dionysus originated in Thrace, Asia Minor, or somewhere deep in the collective unconscious where the line between joy and madness blurs. You follow him now through forest paths littered with flower petals and broken amphorae. His followers, Maenads and Satyrs, sing, dance, chase each other through torchlight. The Maenads, women driven into divine frenzy, don't ask permission. They tear through the night like wild wind, smashing boundaries and occasionally, unlucky mortals. Satyrs, half-goat and entirely inappropriate, follow wherever pleasure leads. And in the center of this swaying chaos, Dionysus. His eyes shimmer like spilled wine in candlelight. He sees you, not like the others do. He sees through you. He is paradox, a god of ecstasy and agony. His wine can warm or ruin. His gifts are beautiful, but unpredictable. He brings joy, then madness. He gives freedom, but takes your name. Those who resist him often end up worse for wear. Take Pentheus, king of Thebes. He mocks Dionysus, bans his worship, declares him a fraud. Dionysus disguises himself, convinces Pentheus to spy on a Bacchic ritual disguised as a woman. The king is discovered, by his own mother and aunts, in a frenzy. They tear him apart, thinking he's a wild animal. It's not subtle, it's not meant to be. Or the pirate incident. A group of sailors capture a beautiful youth, Dionysus in disguise, planning to sell him. The ship begins to sprout ivy. Wine floods the decks. The god turns into a lion, the sailors leap overboard, and he transforms them into dolphins. Why? Because he felt like it. Because they didn't believe. You don't doubt now. Dionysus is also the god of theater, if you can believe it. The masks, the stage, the transformation, ancient Greek tragedies, all dedicated to him. Because theater, like wine, is a form of possession. You watch someone else live, and for a moment, you forget who you are. He doesn't ask you to be reasonable. He asks you to feel, to dissolve the barriers, to laugh too loudly, weep too openly, dance too hard, and remember that beneath all the rules and statues, you're still an animal that wants to howl at the moon. And yes, there are dangers. Dionysus isn't safe. He's intoxicating, and intoxication always has a cost. He walks the line between celebration and surrender. His rituals were once underground, secretive, subversive. Women especially found freedom in his worship, away from the rigid structures of polis life. Some historians think his cult threatened traditional male authority. Others argue it offered a vital outlet, a place where control could be shattered and something else emerge. But when he's with you, there's no judgment, just the sound of drums and the scent of wine-soaked earth. You let go. You stop narrating yourself. You become something else. And maybe that's the point. You glimpse him once more, arms raised, ivy in his hair, laughter rising into the stars. For a second, you want to stay, to dissolve into the frenzy. But then the music softens. The night cools. The madness loosens its grip. Dionysus doesn't bind you. He just offers the door. Whether you walk through it, that's up to you. The last pulse of Dionysian drums fades into the quiet, and your breath comes easier now, though your legs still feel a little shaky. You step away from vine-draped woods into something older, quieter, more grounded, the kind of place where time doesn't just pass, it settles. This is the realm of Demeter. You feel her presence in the soil, in the breeze that rustles golden fields. She is not glittering or warlike or seductive. She is necessary, goddess of the harvest, of grain, of motherhood, and of the cycle you depend on far more than you realize, growth, loss, and return. You're walking now through tall wheat, its golden heads bowing gently. Every step brings the scent of earth after rain, sun-warmed stone, ripening fruit. This is not the dramatic domain of Olympus, it's the heartbeat of the mortal world. Demeter doesn't need thunder or prophecy. She has the patience of planted things. But cross her, and the world withers. You remember her daughter, Persephone, how Hades stole her away to the underworld. But you didn't see the aftermath from Demeter's side. Let's fix that. When Persephone vanished, Demeter searched the earth. Day and night, across mountaintops and oceans, she wandered. When no one helped, when not even the gods admitted what happened, she stopped everything. No crops, no flowers, no gentle rains, just cold fields and barren trees. The first winter, born not from tilt or orbit, but from grief. Eventually, she reached Eleusis, disguised as an old woman, again with the disguises. Honestly, the gods need a better wardrobe budget. She became nurse to a mortal boy, Demophoon, and began an odd little experiment, anointing him with ambrosia, placing him in fire at night, trying to make him immortal. His mother interrupted the ritual and freaked out, understandably. Demeter, furious and divine once more, revealed herself and demanded a temple in her honor. That temple became the heart of the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the most sacred and secretive cults in ancient Greece. We still don't know exactly what happened during the rites. Initiates were forbidden from speaking about them on pain of death, but scholars believe they involved symbolic death and rebirth, mirroring Persephone's descent and return. Historians still argue whether these rituals offered genuine spiritual transformation or just elaborate social bonding disguised in mystery. But Demeter? She doesn't do drama for show. Her grief changes the world. Zeus finally intervenes, not because he cares, probably, but because humans were starving. He sends Hermes to fetch Persephone. The deal is struck. Part of the year above, part below. And thus, the seasons are born. When Persephone returns, Demeter rejoices. Crops grow again, birds sing, spring arrives. When she descends, the goddess of grain mourns. The earth sleeps, winter returns. It's a myth everyone kind of knows. But there's a deeper rhythm here. Demeter teaches you that growth is not constant. That loss is not failure. That even the divine must learn to wait. You pass her now, seated on a low stone bench, basket of grain beside her, hands still. She's not regal. She's real, worn but not weary, powerful in a way that doesn't shout. And yet, her strength is immense. She controls famine, controls abundance. You don't survive without her blessing. And while Zeus may hold the sky, and Poseidon the sea, it is Demeter who feeds the world. Quietly, steadily, she is also one of the few deities mortals regularly invited into their homes. Every harvest festival, every loaf of bread broken, every sip of beer, her presence is never far. And she knows grief. Not just the tragic, dramatic kind, but the slow, aching kind. The kind that doesn't end when the story does. Some fringe interpretations suggest that Demeter and Persephone weren't originally mother and daughter, but dual aspects of the same earth goddess, one fertile, one buried. A cycle personified. Historians still argue whether the myth was imported, reshaped, or if it grew, like a seed, from deep within Greek soil. But regardless of origin, her power is felt. And not just in wheat. Demeter's domain includes law and civilization, too. The slow, cultivated things. The systems that keep chaos at bay. The rhythms that allow life to continue. As you walk past, she finally looks at you, really looks. There is no judgment, just a calm, steady weight. Like soil, like time. And without saying anything, she seems to whisper, "You will lose. And you will grow again." Then she turns back to her basket, sorting the grain. And you walk on, feeling something you haven't felt in several myths now. Peace. You step lightly now, as if not to disturb the rhythm of the earth still humming from Demeter's quiet gaze. But that calm doesn't last. The air tightens. The wind sharpens. You sense a presence before you hear it, before you see it. The atmosphere itself seems reactive. You're entering the territory of Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, women, and divine grudges. Zeus's wife and sister, and, depending on the myth, his greatest supporter or his most committed nemesis. You walk under high stone arches, carved with vines and peacocks, her sacred bird. The kind of space that was built to impress and intimidate. Everything is precise, orderly, regal. Even the silence has authority. This isn't a domain built for comfort. It's built for respect. Hera stands alone, spine straight, eyes like tempered gold. There's beauty, yes, but not the delicate kind. She wears dignity like armor. And let's just say it, Hera doesn't get a fair reputation. She's often cast as the jealous wife, forever plotting against Zeus's many lovers and their even more numerous illegitimate children. And sure, she throws a thunderous tantrum or two. But dig a little deeper and the story changes. She's the goddess of marriage. Not romance. Not honeymoon glow. Marriage. The real, daily, legally binding kind. The foundation of ancient social life. She's the one you pray to for childbirth, fidelity, the weaving of families into something functional. And when Zeus stomps all over that with his various escapades, Hera's fury isn't petty, it's principled. But yes, it is still fury. You probably know the names: Io, Leto, Semele, Alcmene. Zeus seduces or tricks or kidnaps. Greek myths are not subtle. Hera retaliates, usually not against Zeus himself, but against the women and their children. Sometimes she curses them, sometimes she sends snakes, sometimes she extends their suffering across generations. It's not great. Still, historians argue whether these myths reflect actual cultic rivalries, Hera's ancient worship being pushed aside by newer Olympian narratives, or whether they're just ancient cautionary tales wrapped in divine soap opera. Fringe scholars even suggest that Hera was once the chief deity, a powerful mother goddess figure reduced over time to the role of a scorned spouse. What's true is this: Hera doesn't forget. Take Heracles, Zeus's son by Alcmene. Hera hates him, sends snakes to his cradle, drives him mad, sets up impossible labors. The name Heracles even means glory of Hera, possibly to appease her rage. And yet, he survives, thrives, becomes immortal, which raises the question: was Hera trying to destroy him, or forge him? She's also a goddess of protection, patron of cities like Argos and Samos. She has temples grander than Zeus's in some regions. People didn't just fear her, they trusted her, called on her for marriage vows, childbirth, and moments when dignity was all you had left. And remember Jason and the Argonauts? Hera is the one who helps him. She chooses him, guides him, not because he's strong, but because he's respectful. That's what Hera rewards: loyalty, structure, devotion. But she's rarely warm. You don't get hugs in Hera's realm. You get boundaries, laws, the sense that there's a right way to behave, and if you don't meet it, there will be consequences. She has no tolerance for chaos, or for being underestimated, and yet, she's not without pain. You sense it in the way her temples are built, vast, echoing, filled with symbols of fertility and power, but always just a little too grand. As if built to compensate for something taken. You pass beneath a high arch and look back. Hera watches you, unmoving, not inviting you to speak, just making sure you understand. This is her house. This whole system, Olympus, hierarchy, marriage, gods behaving like fools, exists because she upholds it. And she won't let it fall. You may not like Hera, but you need her, because without her, none of this lasts. You're near the summit now, where the air thins, the stars sharpen, and the clouds cling tighter to the mountaintop. Everything is quieter, but not calm. There's a heaviness here, like the sky itself is holding its breath. You've arrived at the very top of Olympus. This is Zeus's domain. You half expect a thunderclap for dramatic effect. Maybe a bolt of lightning hurled theatrically across the sky. But no, he doesn't need theatrics. He already knows you're watching. He's always been watching. Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of the sky, the god who doesn't just cast judgments, he defines them. You can feel his presence before you see him. And when you do, it's less like looking at a man and more like looking at a weather system with opinions. You know the stories. He overthrew Cronus, freed his siblings, and divvied up the cosmos like a celestial real estate deal. Poseidon gets the sea, Hades the underworld, and Zeus? He takes the sky, the clouds, the throne, and the final say. From here, he governs everything: storms, oaths, kings, consequences. And his rule is, let's say, complicated. He's a protector of law and order, yes, but also a notorious breaker of trust. Zeus's love life alone could fill several mythologies, and probably some HR reports. Goddesses, mortals, nymphs, he chases, charms, or tricks them all. He turns into animals, clouds, golden rain, anything to get what he wants. And when he gets caught, he doesn't apologize. He just dares you to challenge him. That's Zeus. But despite his flaws, flaws that are legendary, he still holds everything together. Without Zeus, Olympus doesn't function. Even the gods who grumble about him fall in line. Because in the end, he's the storm at the center of the system. You see him now, seated on his high-backed throne of gleaming stone. An eagle rests beside him, eyes sharp, wings ready. His hands are calm, but you sense the crackle of lightning coiled just beneath his fingertips. Not angry, just always available. He's not alone up here. Surrounding him, just slightly behind or below, are fragments of the world he commands. You see Nike, the winged goddess of victory, perched lightly on one shoulder. Themis, goddess of divine law, sits nearby with scrolls in her lap. And Moira, one of the fates, silently watching the threads. This isn't chaos. This is administration, divine governance, Olympus style. But don't be fooled by the grandeur. Zeus is also a figure of anxiety. He punishes oath breakers. He hurls bolts at the arrogant. He turns those who defy divine order into cautionary tales with feathers or stone for skin. Historians still argue whether Zeus was always this patriarchal overlord, or if earlier versions of him were more like weather deities, less bossy, more breezy. Fringe scholars even suggest his reign symbolized the shift from matriarchal earth cults to patriarchal sky religions. He didn't just win power, he redefined it. By storm. Still, he doesn't control everything. He respects the fates. Even Zeus can't snip or knot the threads they weave. Nor can he easily undo what's been written on the scrolls of Nemesis or Dike, goddesses of justice. He rules, yes, but even he has limits. You remember Prometheus? The titan who gave fire to mankind. Zeus punished him ruthlessly, chained him to a rock, liver pecked out daily. Not because of the act itself, but because Prometheus disobeyed. For Zeus, the sin wasn't fire. It was defiance. He can be generous too. He sends rain to the fields. He answers prayers, when it suits him. He protects travelers and punishes liars. He appears in dreams. He listens, when he wants to. You stand now before his throne, just at the edge. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His silence says, I am the system. The sky, the silence above all stories. And maybe that's true, because while the others squabble, trick, seduce, mourn, and build, Zeus remains the axis around which all of Olympus turns. Not because he's good, not even because he's right, but because in myth, as in life, someone always holds the storm. You turn away slowly, and as you walk back down from Olympus, you realize something. You've seen beauty, cruelty, justice, madness, art, strategy, hunger, peace, vengeance, grief, and joy. And they all wore faces. Divine ones. And none of them were simple. Because in Greek mythology, even the gods are human. Your steps grow slower now, softer. The wind is quieter. The myths begin to loosen their grip, entangling like old dreams before morning. The gods recede, into stories, into stone, into sky. You breathe deeper. You remember the olive trees, the scent of crushed grapes, the glow of firelight in ancient temples. You remember the laughter, the grief, the thunder, and the quiet judgment. And through it all, the feeling that these myths weren't written to amaze you. They were written to explain you. To show how the world spins. Not neatly, but endlessly. Not logically, but with rhythm. In seasons. In chaos. In love and loss and the spaces between. You're back now, lying beneath a sky that once belonged to Zeus, cradled by the earth once blessed by Demeter. Somewhere, an owl hoots. A breeze shifts the grass. You are no longer walking. You are drifting. And the gods? They are watching. But tonight, they are quiet.